Let's do it.
That was more than a mouthful, Sosnoff.
This is a zero DT piece that our research team put together that is, I really like it. Anyway, they called it to long or not to long. I don't even know what that means.
Mhm.
But based on overnight moves in the SPX, the ES, whatever you want to say, what about directionality for zero DT? Do you think you get paid by being directional based on an overnight move? So let's say the market was up overnight last night. Do you buy them? The market was down overnight. Do you sell them? I mean, what do you do based on what happens in the overnight markets when the market opens the next morning and you're sitting there going, all right, how do I want to trade these zero DTs? I don't want to sell a strangle. Should I just sell a naked put? Puts are schmutz. Puts are schmutz.
I mean, I don't know how long this study is going to be with 0 and 1 day. I'm going to imagine it's relatively short.
18 months. 18 months.
Yeah, and in that time frame, we've gone to all-time highs.
Yes.
So I got to say, if we had a down day and you sold puts for the next day, you had to have done well. I think it's good. I think you get paid, sure.
This is an 18-month study looking at overnight markets and determining whether you should sell puts or calls or just taking a directional shot. We're going to give you all the.
No, I was going to say, I don't think I'm going to say the numbers are going to be better for just selling puts versus calls, but I don't think it's going to be as big as you think. And that would be my guess.
There is no question over the last 18 months since we've had zero D options that the market has done really well. In fact, for the last 2 years, the market's been up huge, and we're basically, a day off record highs.
Right.
So it would be really hard at this point, to think that anything you did in the put selling with respect to put selling would be successful.
Sure.
Let's take a look. So at Tasty, our core mechanics rely primarily on delta neutral strategies. And to be fair, we're pretty directional, so that's not totally true. But when we talk about, we do research, it's mostly delta neutral. But the zero DT options are different enough from longer dated options that it's worth reevaluating our longstanding practices. In an efficient market, deciding to be long delta, short delta, or neutral delta is a personal risk preference and market assumptions. But what happens if we pick a side for our zero DT trades and have overnight moves been helpful as signposts? Have they been helpful in us picking direction? So we did, in this case, like we always do now, we use 18 months of research, and we used all basically the tick data every 10 minutes, just so we can control the amount of data. We considered selling zero DT options, not the day before, but at the market opening, using deltas now, 35 deltas, 25 deltas, and 15 deltas options, puts and calls, not together, but puts and calls. All the trades were closed at 25% of max profit. So this is not holding all day. This is just quickly taking profits if you can. We contrasted the performance based on the size and direction of the overnight moves. Did the S rise or fall overnight? Was that by more than 0.5%? And did the S change in absolute value by more than 0.5%? And we did everything at mid price, so you can add a little or subtract a little, however you want to look at it. So short 16 delta puts. Now, this is the one that if you were ever going to have one that's going to be probably the most, I'm not saying the best bang for your buck, but I'm saying you're going to have the highest win percentage, this is going to be it. Because Tony and I both said we've been up for 18 straight months. This has been kind of the layup. I mean, I don't do this, but this has been a layup.
In hindsight, right? I mean,
in hindsight. The win percentage overall, 97%, which is insane. If the XPX rose overnight, 98%. If it fell, this is selling puts, 96%. If the SPX rose, it didn't matter what happened. Half a point, down, up, whatever it is. You made money. If you just sold 16 delta puts on the opening in the zero DTs every single day since we had zero DT options, except for today, you'd be doing quite well.
Right. And the day's not over, but sure.
You'd be doing quite well. Let's go next slide. So now we're going to look at the 15 delta calls. Would you have done as well? Considering it's been a bull market, the win percentages are really high, 92% overall. The win percentage is actually higher than I thought. Here, and the interesting thing here is 100% win percentage if the S&P fell by more than 0.5% overnight.
And 0.5% is nothing. I mean, let's put it where it is.
25, 28 SPU handles.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
It.
Yeah. Right.
But here's the crazy thing, Tony. Overall, you lost money.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Overall, you lost $80 a trade. If you sold puts, you made a lot of money. If you sold calls, you lost money, even though you had a 92% win rate. And
more than I had suspected prior to seeing the study.
Pretty much selling calls only worked if the S&Ps had a pretty big down move overnight. As you step up a class in Delta here to the 25 Deltas, your short puts still worked really well. Of course, regardless of the market, overall 95%, your average daily P&L $118. Overall short puts worked really well, the 15 Delta or the 25 Delta. If you go to the next slide, which is the calls, it's a very different story. You lost money pretty much no matter what you did, unless the S&P was down big overnight. The only time to sell calls was when the S&P was down big overnight, because it must not have reversed against you that many times.
Or the volatility got, so high that even if it did reverse, it didn't reach that number. Again, just another way of saying, when volatility is high, you can almost do, you can do both sides.
And that's only when the S&P, by the way, was down more than 0.5% overnight, as measured by, we put SPX here, but it's really the ES futures. That's how they do that, judge that. The win percentages were still really high, but you overall lost money. So selling zero DTEs overall on the call side, whether it's 15 Delta or 25 Delta, did not work unless there was a big down move overnight. Selling puts works no matter what. Let's go to the 35 Delta.
Schmutz, you said it from the very beginning.
On the 35 Delta, the win rate's still ridiculous. And you can see here, you even made more money.
Right.
You killed it with 35 Delta puts. Those are, the bigger the put, the more money you made. That's because over the last 18 months, instead of being up 53% of the time, the market's been up closer to, over 60% of the time. That's why these numbers are huge. If you go to the calls, I'm sure it's not going to be as pretty. And go to the next slide, Beth. 35 Delta calls, and every number is pretty much a loser, unless we were down big.
Yep.
So the takeaway from this is, with the zero Ds, for the last 18 months, if you wanted to get long, you did really well selling puts on the opening. Didn't matter what Delta. If you wanted to get short, selling calls, you did really poorly, period.
That's the fact, Jack.
That's the fact. Unless the S&P was down big. That's the only thing. Let's go to the next slide, Beth. So takeaways. Over the past 18 months, short out of the money zero DT puts have generally been a winning trade, provided they were managed aggressively. Remember, these are all managed at 25% of max profit. So nothing went at the end of the day. So you had a day we had one day where we opened down like 100 points, the S&Ps, we closed up, but you had a chance to manage that at 25%, you were out.
25% of the profit, yes, correct.
Right. A large overnight gain in this was the only negatively correlated factor for short put success. Short calls, on the other hand, were generally successful only after large overnight losses or large overnight drops. I'm sorry. The efficient market hypothesis says that we shouldn't put too much faith in looking at past price moves for making our trading decisions. But if you decide to be directional with your Z trades, considering overnight S moves or overnight ES moves is a reasonable place to start. The numbers are pretty remarkable.
As Spanky would say of the Hour Gang, remarkable.